Welcome to Audacity Works, a podcast inspired by and dedicated to the working artist, the creative entrepreneur, and generally, doing the damn thing. This exists on the premise that the world belongs to those who have the audacity to believe that their lives have value. This is for you. Welcome to Audacity Works. I am your host, Rachel Strickland, and this is episode number 118. We're going to pick up where we left off last week. Last week was about money and more specifically wanting to perform full-time and some actionable steps that you can make to prepare yourself if you're like, I want to quit my job. It is sucking the life out of me. I hate it here. Then that episode is for you. I'll link it in the show notes, although it should be pretty easy to find because it was just last week. But I do want to make it as easy as possible on you. And that includes giving you some more actionable advice that's not about, savings accounts and making sure that you have a safety net, but rather what avenues to pursue if performing full-time is the thing that you want to do. It's my opinion, and I've had this corroborated from several other artists, that the best way to make a living wage as a performer is on a touring contract. Specifically, touring contracts, European cabarets, some cruise ships, and resident shows in places like Las Vegas are places that you can expect to make a living wage and not have to do anything else. That is not an exhaustive list, it's just what comes off the top of my head. Also, I want to flip the script on last week's episode a little bit and say, did I give you good advice? Yes, I did. And if you do those things, it will help you feel more stable. It will help you have a safety net as you move forward. Also, don't wait to do all those things if you're dying inside. No one knows what is best for you except for you. And I want you to be happy. Pretty sure you do too. At least I hope so. And to that end, there are two questions that I've gotten from listeners that I want to attend to today in a specific order. And like I've mentioned before, I've put this off. I've put it off because I didn't want to talk about it. And I don't want to talk about it because I've already talked about it 1 bajillion times. But the reason that I've talked about it 1 bajillion times is because it keeps happening. And there's a reason that it keeps happening. So the thing that we're talking about is undercutting. This request comes from Allie. Thank you, Allie. Even though I am grumpy about it. And the ways that I get requests to talk about undercutting in the performing arts industry, particularly freelance gig workers, it's always delivered in the same way, which is can we talk about undercutting? Ugh. And that is the correct feeling. And I get it. And let's talk about it. First of all, what is it? Undercutting is when other people in your community who are doing the same work that you do take a rate that is lower than yours, oftentimes much lower than yours, effectively coaching that client to never expect to pay more than that again, and taking work that otherwise you would have been very happy to do and able to do. I want to point out something unique about the performing arts gig life industry. It's not really like this in most other industries. Let's just take coaching, for example, shall we? Particularly online coaching or specialty coaching. I am a coach. I charge what I charge. There are lots and lots of people who charge way more than me. They don't think that I'm undercutting because I'm not taking business away from them. There are so many more people that charge way less than me, and they're not taking business from me. The reason for that is that you don't pay a coach, or at least not usually. If you're going to invest to work with a coach, it's because you want that coach. You want that brain, their collection of experiences filtered through their perspective. It's not because of the price point. To a certain extent, gig industry is similar, but only once you get to a certain point where the product that you have on offer is so unique, or you are so well known, you have name recognition for this thing, or the thing that you do just can't be duplicated in the way that you do it. then it's less about the price point and more about, no, I want that one. I want that one. And there are some things that make that really difficult. Namely, it takes so much time to develop into that artist. Where you're like, this artist cannot be duplicated. What they do is so unique to them. Their flavor is so recognizable. That shit takes time. And a kind of like disillusioning truth about the situation is that by the time most people get there, they're like, I don't want to fucking do this anymore. Like, this is hard. And by the time you get there, you've generally spent a decade becoming this artist, which means you've had a decade of dealing with an industry that was not built to help you thrive. It was not. And I want to reference back to episode 117 from last week. What's the reason you got into this? What's the reason people get into the arts? Financial restitution is not the reason people devote themselves to their arts. And when we choose to make it our living, or a significant part of our living, then our relationship to that changes, and it becomes an important component of how we go about our work. But we have to remember that there is always, the tide's always coming in with new artists who don't have that relationship with their work yet, or maybe they never will. So they don't know how to charge an appropriate fee, and they're just going to charge whatever they think is fine. And most people think that, $250 for a 5-minute whatever sounds great. It's not, but they don't know that yet. So here are some frustrating truths about undercutting. One, the only thing that you can do about it is talk loudly within your own community, and hopefully with kindness, because if you attack someone, you're just going to push them deeper into their defenses. But communicating with other people in your community and within your industry is the only way. Like, that's the control that you have. That is the control that you have. You don't have any control over what someone else does and over what someone else charges. All you can do is talk to them about it. Almost no one does this. And I get it. It's an uncomfortable conversation to initiate. It feels awkward, and it's so much easier to just talk shit about someone behind their back and behind closed doors with your close friends who are also in the industry. And like, I get that too. But when the only thing that you can do isn't something that most people are willing to do, you can see how it's a losing battle without that willingness to communicate. Here's the second frustrating truth. Even if you are in a community where people are openly speaking with each other, they're sharing their rates, they're sharing the reason for their rates, they're having productive conversations, it still keeps happening in those communities, and there is a reason for this. That reason is the high turnover in this industry. The tide is always rising. And this isn't one of those, a rising tide raises all ships. This is a different metaphor. Like, it's not the tide. It's more like, the floodwaters. There's always new artists entering the market. So just having like one roundtable discussion with everyone in your local industry is not going to cut it, because there's always going to be new artists coming in. And they need to know the things too. And if you're an ambitious young artist, particularly if you're an island, you're not going to ask. And if nobody's going to like offer to have a conversation with you, whether or not you accept it is a different story, then you're just going to operate under whatever you think is best. Ask me how I know. I was that person. That's my heat on in the background. I'm sorry for the background noise, but I'm not going to cut it off because it was fucking cold. So looking back to the time when I was the emerging artist, and I was undercutting everyone, and I didn't know. And I desperately wanted someone to teach me the correct way, or a better way. But number one, my way was working. I was getting tons of work. Obviously, that usually happens. And two, everyone hated me. And I didn't know why, because nobody was telling me why. I just knew that people were cold and hostile, and I was trying to be warm and friendly, and I didn't understand why I was being given the cold shoulder. In fact, the first person to tell me to raise my rates, this was in my very first year of performing freelance aerial, was a client. A client had hired me to perform at her wedding, and she loved what I did, and I loved her, and she was so much fun, the bride. And afterwards, she gave me my check, and she's like, I think you should raise your rates. Like, you're worth a lot more than this. You're worth twice this, at least. And I was like, oh, shit, okay. And regardless of what industry you're in, if you ever have a client tell you, you need to charge more for your services, listen to them. And yeah, like I said, I would have really loved to get any advice on how to operate with integrity in the industry. But would you ask advice of someone who was actively mean to you? No, you wouldn't, because you don't trust them, because they're mean. If you were ever wonder why Rachel created the Audacity Project. Why would someone do this? And I have been asked that many times. This is why, because I was that person, and I wished so much that I had any kind of resource to guide me into a way of doing business as a professional that was in integrity. So that's why I made it. You know, that whole be the change you want to see in the world. Yep. Also going to note here, the Audacity Project opens for enrollment next month, and the link is going to be in the show notes. I was having a chat with my friend Brett Copes, the rigger. I'm a lifelong performer and rigger, and we were having the chats, and we're like, man, have you ever noticed that we're answering the same questions today that we were answering like 15 years ago? And he was like, yeah, what's up with that? Like, I'm still explaining to people why rigging from trees is a bad idea, because it's an unknown component. Like, that you don't have any knowledge about the integrity of the structure. Like, of course, to him and, you know, to me, it seems really obvious, but like, I was that aerialist, and I was like, I would love to hang from a tree. He was like, why are we still answering these questions? I'm like, because it's not the same people asking the questions 15 years later. It's all new people, because the floodwaters are always rising. So if you're gonna, like, as we were doing, you know, if we're gonna offer education in this way, we're gonna have to keep saying the same things over and over again, because people haven't heard it before. So those are the two frustrating truths about why undercutting happens. Number one, the only thing that you can do is communicate with the other people in your industry and in your community. And number two, it's probably going to keep happening because the turnover is so high. So now that I've told you the two frustrating truths, let's flip the script and see what else can you do to operate in this industry in a way that you can stomach. First, I'll tell you what not to do. I could not tell you the amount of times someone has come to me and said, I just want to create a marketable act. I'm like, I am not the coach for you. There's a couple of reasons for this. Number one, it's not in integrity with my value as an artist. My values as an artist are to pull out what is most authentic in other artists. And what is most authentic cannot be arrived at by pandering to some amorphous idea of what the market wants. Number two, if you just, like, you could pull a marketable act out of your ass, and what ends up happening is that it's a very cookie cutter kind of offering, and it's not going to make you more money probably, because 27 other artists are doing the exact same thing. Like, how many solos have you seen that follow the exact same pattern of movements? Like, start out with a slow spin, and then we're going to go to a medium spin, and then we're going to do an orbit, and then maybe like a lift with some dynamic sequences, and then we'll do a really, really fast spin. You're like, yeah, seen it? Yep, checking all the boxes. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying it's common. And if it's common, then it's easy to replace. And you don't have any leverage in a negotiation to say, well, I'm the only one that does this way. and this is what I'm asking for. So my advice is today, and always will be, to lean way into your weird. And not just your weird, you're fucking bizarre. The things that make you think, why would anyone buy this? Like, is anyone gonna want this? That's not the right question to ask. That's a losing battle to ask this question. Who's gonna buy this? Don't ask that question. Ask the question, is this interesting to me? Is this worth the, frankly, the pain and the sometimes suffering, although, don't suffer, that's optional, of training and of upskilling and of investing in coaches and costumes? Because if you're not fascinated by the questions that you're exploring in your work and the movement quality that you're exploring and the characters that you're bringing to life, why would anyone else care? You don't even care. And when you have something that you have made based on those questions, then you have something that is unique to you. Then you can market it. It doesn't mean making yourself palatable to some amorphous, ephemeral ideal. It means take what you've built, get some slick ass photos taken of it, get some great video of it, and take it to people. And that, my friends, is the hill that I will die on. And I would do that, and I would tell you to do that in any industry that you're in. Nothing makes me distrust a coach faster that I personally am working with if they tell me to change my appearance or to like hide the hint of cleavage in this one headshot because I want to appeal to a broader audience. Oh, fuck you. I have boobs, okay? Everyone knows that I have boobs. They're not offensive. So here's what I don't want to happen. I don't want people to hear this episode and immediately sort of internalize what I've said and be like, oh my God, am I the problem? I mean, you might be. I don't know. But what I don't want to happen is that you stop pursuing work and stop pursuing what you're doing because you're afraid of stepping on anyone's toes. If anything, the people that come to me and they're like, I'm afraid of stepping on toes, those are the last people that I would worry about actually stepping on toes. There is a very, very clear answer, and that is asking the people that have come before you. Ask the people that are working in your local industry. Ask the people that are doing the things that you want to be doing, or they've done it before in the past. There's your answers. That's where your answers are going to be. And if you want to engage in this art form and you want to perform and you're like dying to get on stage and you don't need to earn money for it and you don't even want to earn money from it, you can still perform on stage. You can still be a part of the culture. If you want to do it in integrity, yes, you will want to uphold the market standard. The only way to know what that is in your local industry is to ask. And that will at least give you a ballpark in which to operate, even if you choose to ignore it. There was an artist, I think I've said this before on the podcast, and she didn't need or want money from performing, but she wanted to perform. She's like, there's a pay. I'm being part of this cabaret. I auditioned for it and I got accepted, and now I'm part of the cast and they're paying me, but I feel really bad taking that money because I don't need it. And I'm like, you have to take the money. You have to take the money. Take the money. She's like, but I feel bad. I'm like, that's okay. Give it to one of the other artists. Donate it to another cause that supports, that directly supports working artists. But you have to take the money because money in exchange for labor is appropriate. I know at the beginning of this episode, I said that I was going to answer 2 questions in this episode, but I spent the whole time talking about the question on undercutting. Not actually surprised that happened, but it did. So I'm going to wait and handle the second question next week. It's only vaguely related, so it'll make sense as its own episode. But in closing, let me offer you this. My observations about late-stage capitalism are that pretty much every industry that I observe is not built to support the people that are contributing to it. Most industries that I observe are actually built to exploit the people that contribute to it. I am not saying this to bum you out. I'm saying this to invite you to keep your eyes open as you walk into the jungle because you can find a way to make it work for you. And you can operate in integrity. You can even find a way to make it lucrative as fuck. You can. You really can. But it's not going to be obvious because that's not how it was built. It was not built to give you a lucrative way to live. That's why I call it the jungle. There's no path through the jungle. You just have a machete and hopefully your eyes open. And that's the message here today. Here's your machete. Keep your eyes open. Enjoy the jungle. And if you feel that tension when it's like working against you, no, it's not you. It's not you. You're not missing anything. It's just the jungle. Ask for help. Get good intel. Keep your eyes open. Your life has value. What you make has value. The creative urges that wake you up in the middle of the night and you can't sleep, that has value. So thank you. Thank you for believing it, even though everything seems to be telling you the opposite. And you believe it anyway, and that's so fucking badass. We're at the end of the episode now, so I'm going to give you the one update that I have, which is Creatrix is open to the public. As of right now, this very moment, there are 5 spaces left. And those questions about like, what's fascinating to me? What do I think is worthy of my life? What is like the thing that's keeping me up at night? If you want to explore those in a lovingly crafted container for 5 nights in a warm place with hammocks and burbs and possible alligators, that is what I built Creatrix for. That and teaching people witchcraft. You'll find it in the show notes. And as a note, I am recording this on January 20th. And it's being released on January 29th. So things may have shifted by then, but I'm always going to keep the application and the website up to date. It's like very important to me to do that for full transparency. So if you check on the website and on the application, those things will be kept up to date for you. All right, my friends, I'm like out of breath after this. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. And thank you for coming to all of my TED Talks. And thank you for listening. Without you, I'm just a woman talking to herself in her office. The greatest compliment that you could give me if this was useful to you would be to share it with someone that you thought it could help. And thank you. If you have requests for future episodes, you can reach me on Instagram at Rachel Strickland Creative or on Patreon at Rachel Strickland Creative. This podcast is powered by Patreon, and I'm so glad because ads are annoying as shit and I hate them. And I've had people be like, you should monetize the podcast. And I'm like, no, I hate advertisements so much. This podcast brought to you by Bubble Tea. Let's listen to a bubbly little... No, absolutely not. Just immediately no. So thank you to my patrons for saving us from that fresh hell and for making this and so much more possible for me and for believing in me and my work. Thank you. And to all of you, my friends, thank you for your work. Machete at the ready, eyes open, enjoy the jungle. Don't go back to sleep.